The CEO looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Security is on their way to escort you out. You're done here." The board members nodded smugly behind him, already celebrating my termination. What they didn't know was that I had a folder in my bag that would make every single one of them regret this moment for the rest of their careers. Because I wasn't just an employee, I was the person who owned 53% of everything they thought was theirs. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in that boardroom watching 7 overpaid executives try to destroy my career without realizing they were actually working for me. My name is Rebecca, and for the past 4 years, I've been the Director of Operations at Whitmore Industrial Solutions. It's a mid-size manufacturing company that supplies specialty parts to aerospace and automotive industries. We have about 400 employees, decent revenue, and until recently, I thought I had a stable career here. What most people at the company didn't know was how I actually came to own the majority stake. My grandfather, Harold Chen, had been one of the original investors when Whitmore was founded back in 1987. He was a silent partner who never got involved in day-to-day operations. When he passed away 3 years ago, I inherited his shares. Combined with some additional shares I'd purchased myself over the years through our employee stock program, I quietly became the majority shareholder. I never announced it, never made a big deal about it. Why would I? I loved my job. I wasn't interested in being some figurehead owner collecting dividends while doing nothing. I wanted to earn my position, prove myself on merit, and maybe someday use my ownership stake to guide the company in a better direction. Until then, I kept it to myself. My shares were held through my grandfather's trust, registered under the Chen family holdings name. Nobody connected the dots. The problem started about 8 months ago, when the company brought in a new CEO named Victor Strauss. He came from some private equity firm and had all the warmth of a glacier and the ethics of a used car salesman. From day one, Victor made it clear he wanted to streamline operations. Translation: cut costs by any means necessary, squeeze employees until they broke, and inflate short-term profits to make himself look good. Victor and I clashed almost immediately. When he proposed eliminating our employee wellness program to save $70,000 a year, I pushed back. When he wanted to cut the maintenance budget by 40%, I showed him projections of how much equipment failures would cost us. When he suggested we could reclassify certain overtime hours as voluntary training, I told him that was wage theft and possibly illegal. Each time I challenged him, his eyes got a little colder. Each time I presented data that contradicted his plans, his smile got a little tighter. "You know, Rebecca," he said to me one afternoon, leaning against my office door frame, "you seem to think you understand this business better than the people who actually run it. I understand operations. That's literally my job. Your job," he said slowly, "is whatever I decide it is." I should have seen the writing on the wall right then, but I naively believed that being good at my work would protect me. 3 weeks ago, Victor called me into his office and introduced me to Gerald Whitmore III. Gerald was the grandson of the company's founder and held about 18% of the company's shares. He was also, to put it diplomatically, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Gerald had inherited his shares and his position on the board, but had never worked an actual day in his life. "Gerald has expressed some concerns about your department," Victor said, gesturing for me to sit. Gerald nodded importantly. "We've been reviewing the numbers, Rebecca. Your operational costs are higher than industry average." I blinked. "Our operational costs are higher because we maintain quality standards that exceed industry requirements. That's why our contracts specifically cite our quality metrics. It's why clients pay a premium." "See, that's exactly the attitude Victor mentioned," Gerald said, shaking his head, "always making excuses instead of finding efficiencies." I felt my jaw tighten. With respect, I've documented $3.2 million in efficiency improvements over the past 2 years. I can send you the reports. "We've seen your reports," Victor interrupted smoothly. "Very thorough. Perhaps too thorough. Some board members have noticed that you seem to have an unusual amount of access to financial data, data that someone in your position shouldn't necessarily be requesting." My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what he was implying. "Are you accusing me of something?" I asked quietly. Victor spread his hands innocently. Just observations, Rebecca. Just observations. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated rapidly. I was suddenly excluded from leadership meetings I'd attended for years. My access to certain systems was restricted without explanation. Emails I sent to department heads were unanswered. People I'd worked with for years started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. Then came the formal complaints, 3 of them, filed anonymously, alleging that I had created a hostile work environment through my aggressive management style. I had never received a single complaint in 4 years. Now, suddenly, there were 3 in 1 week, all using suspiciously similar language. I requested copies of the complaints. HR said they were confidential. I asked for specific examples of my allegedly hostile behavior. They said they couldn't disclose details due to the ongoing investigation. The investigation that I didn't even know existed until that moment. Last Tuesday, I received a calendar invite for an emergency board meeting. The subject line read, "Personnel Matter, Mandatory Attendance." When I walked into that boardroom, I knew immediately what was happening. Victor sat at the head of the table, flanked by Gerald and 5 other board members. HR Director Patricia Wells sat in the corner, looking uncomfortable. There was no chair set up for me at the table. "Rebecca, thank you for joining us," Victor said, not offering me a seat. "We'll keep this brief. The board has concluded its review of the complaints filed against you, as well as a broader assessment of your performance and conduct. We have determined that your employment with Whitmore Industrial Solutions will be terminated effective immediately for insubordination and creating a hostile work environment." Okay, I need to stop right here. Because in this moment, standing in front of these smug executives who had clearly orchestrated this entire thing, I had a choice to make. Do you think I should have just walked away, taken the high road, and fought it legally later? Subscribe right now if you think I did the right thing by staying and fighting back in that room. Drop me a comment telling me what you would have done, because I genuinely want to know. And keep watching, because what happened next made every single person in that room wish they had never messed with me. I stood there, letting the silence stretch. Victor's smug expression never wavered. Gerald was actually grinning. The other board members shuffled papers, avoiding my eyes. "Do I get an opportunity to respond?" I asked calmly. "There's nothing to respond to," Victor said. "The decision has been made. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." "I see." I reached into my bag and pulled out a leather folder. "Before security arrives, I'd like to share something with the board." "Rebecca, this isn't a negotiation." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." I opened the folder and slid a document across the table to Patricia in HR. "Please distribute copies to each board member." Patricia looked at Victor, who rolled his eyes but nodded. She made copies and handed them around. I watched as confusion slowly transformed their faces. "What is this?" Gerald demanded. "That," I said, "is a certified statement from our corporate registrar confirming current shareholder composition. If you look at line 7, you'll see that Chen Family Holdings owns 53% of Whitmore Industrial Solutions." Victor scoffed. "We're aware of Chen Holdings. They're a passive investor. What does this have to do with—" "I'm Chen Holdings. Or more precisely, I'm the sole trustee and beneficiary of my grandfather Harold Chen's estate, which established Chen Family Holdings. I inherited his shares 3 years ago. Combined with shares I've purchased through the employee stock program, I own the majority stake in this company." The color drained from Victor's face. That can't be right," Gerald stammered. "Call our legal counsel," I suggested. "Call the registrar. Call anyone you'd like. I'll wait." Victor grabbed his phone. The next 15 minutes were some of the most satisfying of my entire life. I stood there, perfectly composed, while he made increasingly frantic phone calls. I watched the board members exchange panicked glances. I saw Patricia from HR quietly slide her chair backward, clearly trying to distance herself from the situation. Finally, Victor set down his phone. His face was the color of old paper. "It appears," he said slowly, "there may have been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I corrected him. "You attempted to terminate the majority owner of this company based on fabricated complaints and a manufactured investigation. Let's talk about what happens now." I pulled out a second document from my folder. "This is a formal demand for an emergency shareholder vote. I'm exercising my rights under the company bylaws to call for a vote of no confidence in current board leadership and executive management." Gerald sputtered. "You can't just—" "I can. I have the shares to call the vote, and I have the shares to win it." I looked around the table. "But I'm willing to discuss alternatives. Specifically, Mr. Strauss, I'd like to discuss the terms of your immediate resignation." "My resignation?" Victor's voice cracked. "Your resignation," I confirmed, along with a full retraction of the complaints filed against me, a written admission that this termination attempt was improper, and the immediate restoration of all my system access and responsibilities. And if I refuse, then the shareholder vote proceeds, and I should mention that I've already retained legal counsel to review potential claims against you personally, Mr. Strauss: defamation, tortious interference, possible securities violations, depending on how these anonymous complaints were orchestrated. I tilted my head. My attorneys are very thorough. The next hour was brutal in the best possible way. Victor tried every angle, claiming he didn't know about my ownership, suggesting we could work together going forward, even attempting to shift blame entirely onto Gerald and the other board members. In the end, I got everything I wanted. Victor submitted his resignation effective immediately. Gerald was removed from the board through a separate vote I called that same day, the other board members suddenly very eager to cooperate with the actual majority owner. Patricia from HR personally shredded the anonymous complaints in front of me and provided a written statement that the investigation had been initiated at Victor's direction without proper cause. But I wasn't done. Over the following week, I worked with our legal team to trace the anonymous complaints. The digital forensics pointed to Gerald's personal computer. It turned out that he and Victor had been colluding for months, planning to push out anyone who stood in the way of their cost-cutting scheme, which I later learned was designed to pump up the company's valuation so they could orchestrate a sale and pocket millions. I also discovered that Victor had been planning to award several major contracts to a company owned by his brother-in-law. The kickback scheme would have cost Whitmore millions while lining Victor's pockets. I reported everything to our legal counsel and relevant authorities. The investigation is ongoing. As for me, I'm now the acting CEO while the board conducts a search for Victor's permanent replacement. Several board members have suggested I take the role myself. I'm considering it, but honestly, I love operations. I love being on the ground, solving real problems, making things work. What I've learned from all of this is that sometimes the people who act the most powerful are actually the most vulnerable. Victor strutted around like he owned the place. Turns out, I did. To anyone watching who's dealing with a toxic boss or workplace injustice, document everything, know your rights, and never underestimate the value of keeping a few cards close to your chest. Sometimes the best weapon is the one nobody knows you have.
Thank you so much for watching this whole story. I still get chills thinking about the look on Victor's face when he realized who he'd been trying to fire. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of our workplace drama stories. And if you have your own story about terrible bosses, HR nightmares, or workplace injustice, I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments or send it to us. It might be featured in an upcoming video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.